It's Andrew Ford here from Social Star. Today I want to talk about personal branding, and I normally come in and talk to the MBA and EMBA students directly, but unfortunately in the current circumstances we can't do that. So I thought I'd record a little video for about half an hour to talk about what we've learned in personal branding over the last 8 years of doing it for executives, celebrities, and corporate escapees, who are kind of my favourite ones because they're just like me. Left my corporate job 8 years ago, spend more time with my kids, and I love to help people do the same thing and get back some of their time. So I've got a little PowerPoint presentation I wanted to run through, and then I'll come in for some Q&A on the phone virtually when you do your actual class. So I hope this helps. So business has changed, and we know that that's the truth, is that over the last 5, 6, 7 years, business has gone more online, and never so much as right now. So in the current coronavirus times, obviously we're relying much more heavily on digital, and we're super busy because of that. But the thing is that over time, we haven't really changed what we do. So companies haven't changed as much as the market has, particularly in certain sectors. Some sectors are more ahead of the curve than others, but in a lot of areas, they still haven't really got their online presence up and running, and I'll explain why in a moment. So the first thing we want you to do is to just grab your phone out while you're watching this video or your laptop and just do a quick Google of yourself. Now, some people do this regularly, some people have never done this. However, I highly recommend that you understand what Google says about you, because this is what other people will perceive you to be. Think of this. If you go for a job interview, if a client refers you to somebody else, the first thing you're going to do is want to know a bit more about them. And what do? We turn to Google. Google in Australia is the most popular search engine. And the truth is that 85% of business-to-business referrals is to a person's name, not even to a company. So they're going to look up you personally. And I work primarily with professionals. So they're doctors, lawyers, accountants, dentists, physiotherapists. There might be bankers, real estate agents, whatever you can think of, I've worked with them. I also work with a bunch of other entrepreneurs, but the same is true. Even if you're going to raise money, the investors are going to want to look a bit about you. And if you're not there, firstly, you're conspicuous by your absence of having nothing. If you've got a very common name, you have to fight your way to the top. If you've got an unusual name, it's often difficult because it shows everything you've ever done, back in the MySpace days as well. So there's all different challenges depending on your different circumstances. However, if you don't know where you are, you don't know how you can change it to get where you want to go. So the first thing is to Google yourself and just think about what those results are. And if Kevin wants to pause the video, you can have a discussion around that, or just do it in your own time and understand what Google says about you, because we can change it. It can be modified and it can be altered. And in fact, my very first client was the son of a former premier of Victoria, and he came to me at a party we were running on the top of a penthouse of a hotel back in my crazy marketing days, and said to me, you're good at this digital stuff, Andrew. How do you change what Google says about you? Because when I Google my name, all this bad stuff comes up. And if you Google this young man now, he's got a completely different brand presence after working on it for many years. So the challenge is, how do we stand out from the crowd? How do we stand out from everybody else who's doing this? I mean, every year I teach this, the bar gets raised, people do more, and we have to get ahead by doing something better or more meaningful than others. And in this presentation, I'm going to explain to you what's going to stand out in 2020. So the main difference is you. And I say this because everyone in your room is doing the same degree. They might have a similar range of experience. They might have, similar amount of connections. And if not in the room, in the University of RMIT, think of all the other universities in Melbourne, think of the universities in Australia and even overseas, and suddenly your competition base is thousands of people just like you. The resumes are not going to be that different. So the difference is your personality, your values, and what makes you uniquely you, your experiences, things you're passionate about. These are the things that count. And I'm always talking to clients who say, my friend said, I shouldn't put my hobbies on LinkedIn, it's irrelevant. Or should try to be more professional. And it's actually the opposite. The things that make you different, the things that make you unique are actually the things that are of interest and will stand you apart from the crowd. And I'm going to explain that soon. So what are we selling here when we're going online, whether it's for your own business, whether it's for a company you work with and you're in sales or marketing or leadership, or even if you're just trying to get a job, which most people are. So what we're doing is we're not selling our unique sort of skill set, if you like. We're selling trust. Trust is the thing that they want to buy. They want to look at us and go, you're the right person for the job, and I trust that if I hire you, it's going to work out. And Amy Cuddy, who's in the picture here, from Harvard University, wrote a really good, interesting paper and said that there's two things that equal trust. And one thing is likability. That means they need to like who you are. And the second thing is credibility, which means they believe you can do the job effectively. Those two things equal trust, and that's the influential factor in you getting a job, raising money, getting more clients, etc., etc. So likability is the things that, is the background, the habits, the stories we tell, the people we know, the personality we have, and the credibility is university degree, where we've worked, how long we've worked, and the different courses and projects we've worked on. Those things matter equally as much as per her research says. So if we think about this guy in the picture, it's Elon Musk. Now, love him or hate him, he's had some ups and downs in his own social media. However, he's very influential. And I want to talk to you a little story about how he launched a car and for his company Tesla. Now, it's the Tesla 3 that I'm talking about, which was probably about a little while ago now, a couple of years. But the way he did it was quite remarkable. He leaned on the experience of the best marketer really in the world at the time, which was Steve Jobs from Apple, and decided to put on a black skivvy and go on stage and talk about not just his car, but the movement that he's created. And it's really interesting. If you Google the Tesla 3 launch, you'll see a guy who doesn't present very well, is a bit socially awkward, and he gets up there and the first thing he says to his audience is, I'm glad you came, we're all here for the same reason, and that's to talk about global warming. Not the sort of introduction you would expect. And then he puts on charts and graphs about global warming and particles per million and so forth, because he knows that he's not selling a car. He's selling us a mission that we're here to save the planet from global warming. Now, the reason he does this is very clever, because not everybody wants to buy a car right now. But put up your hand if you want to save the planet, and that's probably everybody. And so if you want to save the planet, you're more likely to want to buy a Tesla, because he's going to tell you why that is good for the planet. So he starts off with his personal mission, then he goes into the company mission, and then he tells us about the product, which is a car. And the reason I show this slide is there's 3 brands in any marketplace, and if you're working for a bank and you're selling personal banking, then there's you, the bank name, and then the products that you sell. And all 3 are taken into consideration when people think that they trust you or not. Do they trust the bank? Do they trust the product? Or do they trust you? And it's better if they have all 3. But if they don't know who you are, then they've only got the products and the company to trust. And if they don't trust the company, they've only got the products. Not a very influential sales technique. It doesn't really equal trust. So in a lot of situations, people will buy from people who they trust more than the product or the company. So it's very important that no matter what your job, no matter what job you're going for, no matter what your entrepreneurial capacity, people will want to know who you are, and that will equal trust in their eyes. Hence why Googling yourself and understanding personal branding is so powerful. So we have a process to build trust, and we call this process e-traction, digital attraction. And we came about it because in doing marketing, I realized that all the other formats were becoming ineffective. I did corporate marketing at Hewlett-Packard and IBM and Telstra, and I did every sort of marketing under the sun, from TV and radio and outdoor and events and in-flight cinema, everything. And what I realized is that the sales process was very ineffective when you're doing cold sales. cold emails, cold calls, they do work. They still work, but they're just not as effective as other forms. And what we found is that referrals are the absolute key to business, not only in professional services, but in everything. I bought my phone case because someone told me about it. We buy things off Instagram and food and restaurants and travel and insurance and banking even because other people recommend it. And there's a bunch of recommendation sites such as TripAdvisor just to do these things. So we realize that the power of other people referring things is so pervasive that it actually equals profit. So Tesla is a good example. Their marketing budget for advertising is zero. They completely rely on referrals to sell their cars and PR. And so did Apple, and Apple spends money on marketing, but they spend a lot less than the competitors, and so therefore they can be more profitable because consumers that are referred look around less, prepared to pay higher prices, and are more loyal. So this trust thing is super important, not just for you, but for that bottom line of the company. So attraction is your brand. And so as most referrals go to people, we need you to look good. And so how do we do that in digital? Well, there's a couple of different things about it. We'd like them to find your website, and that's not your company website, that's your personal website. We'd like them to find your LinkedIn profile, which is the first thing that was likely to come up under a Google search for your name if you do not have a personal website. But they're also going to find things like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and those things. So we want to make sure they're nice and clean and professional, but for suiting the type of mode that it is. So there's just a couple of my examples from my personal ones. So branding done well brings people to you. And I like to use this analogy with cold calling compared to e-traction. So imagine there's a bale of hay and we're doing the old needle in a haystack trick. So I don't know where that came from, but it'd be interesting to find out. If someone knows, you can email me. But imagine there is a needle in that haystack, and one way to go about finding that needle is to scour through the haystack. Obviously, the haystack's big, the needle's small, it's very difficult to do. Or you could stand outside the haystack with a magnet. Now, which is more effective? That's what e-traction is. What we want to do is brand ourselves so that people select themselves to us and walk forward in our sales process and call us and want to deal with us. Now, you think that's a dream in some organizations or some industries. I've done this for insurance people. I've done it for real estate people. It doesn't seem to matter which industry it is or how competitive. It just may require more work or more effort to stand out from everybody else. So how do we do this? So we've got a 12-step process, which I've divided back down into 3 core modules. Understand, build, and leverage. I'm going to go through them quickly just to give you an understanding of what they are. So the first one is understand. And this is really understanding yourself. The more you understand yourself, the more you'll be able to brand yourself online and communicate that to someone else. The challenge of branding yourself is that we think we know ourselves and we think in feelings, but we don't think in rational thought. So it's very hard to explain to others who we are, what we do, and our value. Now, I'm going to talk about values, a slightly different thing now. So the first module we normally go through, and I'm just going to go through a couple as an example, is values, which is what's important to you. So these are the things in life we hold dear. And this is a snapshot from my old website where you could click on any of these and go to my blogs. And so I wrote about 4 different things. So in the bottom right, you'll see that I'm talking about my kids. And in the top right, you'll see I'm talking about exercise. On the left-hand side, I'm talking about digital and business. And in the bottom, I'm talking about education. So reading my book is part of education. So if we look at that, I'll go, there are 4 things that are important to me out of the 7 values that we analyze. And they're all things that I think bring people to me. But what's interesting is I evaluate people's values as part of my process, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of business people. And what I find is the people who come to me generally have the top 4 values. They generally have a high value on all of these things: family, health, education, and business. And that's why they come to me. And people who have the opposite values don't come to me because they relate to me. They find me personable. They like what I write about. They like how I position myself. They agree with the things that I say. Your personal brand is 2 things. It's amplification and it's qualification. So by doing your brand well, more people will see it, and then, which is amplification, and then qualification is less people will come to you because you're being more specific about what you want. I don't want people to come to me if they don't agree with my values, because they're not going to be a good match for my process, which I've specifically designed for people who have my values. So if you have similar values than that, please give me a call. The second thing we do is we look at the personality. So once we understand your target market, which is a reflection of you, and we understand what you're like and what you're going to talk about, we go, well, how do we position you online? What are the things you're going to do? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? We look at a whole bunch of different things in personality. And in this particular slide, what we're doing is we're translating your personality into how you would look and feel online. And this is part of my e-course that I've created. It's called Launch in 12 Weeks, about relaunching your brand. And it's got a whole description around these different segments. Personality and this module is far too much to go into in this quick explanation, but I just want to give you an indication of the things that we need to think about before we start executing and building stuff, because we don't know what our brand is. It's very difficult to articulate it in the future. The second stage is build. So once you've done a bit of work on understanding, and please Google my process and read my book, it's freely available to students, you'll get a thorough understanding of yourself and how to position it. Then we get into the build phase, and I'll cover just a couple of elements here too. So personal branding is about creating assets of value that other people can see and get an understanding of us. So we need to do things like have written content. So people say, oh, I've got some words on my website that explains me. And I go, that's great, but no one's on your website. And people need to get an indication of you on social media before they will ever visit your website generally, unless they're Googling a particular solution. The best way to update your website and to gain people is to write blogs, produce content, do videos, etc. So we need to have a web presence as a destination. We need to have written content. We need social media to contact people from the start. But we need visual imagery of videos and images so they can see us in action. And we also need things like a tagline, which is the positioning statement all about us. So these are assets that I talk about. Can't go into details about all of them. However, you get an indication of what they're like as we go through the decks. So before we go on, people say to me a lot of the time, well, what does it matter if I have a photo, and what does it matter if I have videos? How important is that when I sell well in real life? People meet me, and that's when I really convince them. Well, it just goes to show that the people who have that strategy in these times with the coronavirus, they can't do that. They have to act on digital, and they're suddenly realizing that, wow, I can operate my business digitally on Zoom or in other mediums, and I can, and the importance of my brand is now increased. So, I can't tell you how many calls I've had from previous clients wanting to update their brand. They've let lapse, or I gave quotes to and they didn't go forward with the project because it wasn't important at the time, etc., etc. So we know that it's important, but think about this. Malcolm Gladwell, one of my favorite authors, in The Tipping Point and in Blink, he's got a series of books that I love. He says that there is as much value in the blink of an eye as in months of rational analysis. And what he means is there's a subconscious thing that we do when we go and look at a photo. And what it is that we can't tell the difference between a still image and real life. The human brain has not evolved enough over the last 200 years compared to 60,000 years of evolution. We see something and we think it's real, and we don't know. And we judge it instantly, and we don't even know that we do it. Because there's two parts of the brain. There's the frontal cortex of logic and language, and there's the back brain. And the back brain is feelings, and we make our decisions more in feelings than we do in logic. We justify with logic, but we think in feelings. You ever had a time when you're like, I want to hire that person, but there's just something about him. It doesn't feel right in my gut. Or my intuition says it's not the right thing. Or I just have a feeling this is not the right way to go. That's your subconscious brain trying to interpret a feeling, but you can't consciously interpret it because these brains do not connect effectively or efficiently. Think about this. If you've ever been to the movies and you've cried in a movie, put up your hand. I'm sure there's lots of you. I'm not too manly to admit I've cried in a movie. But why do we do that? It's a projection on a 2D screen of fake people pretending to do stuff. So why do we cry? We cry because once we understand that it's a movie and we let go of that pretext and we get absorbed into the storyline, our brains can't tell the difference between real and not real, and it affects our feelings and it goes straight to our back brain. A crap movie is crap because you're thinking consciously about it and you're not dropping your guard because the acting's poor or so forth. That's the difference. So we can and we do judge things in 2D just the same as we do in 3D. So photography is vitally important, and if I got you to guess what this guy in the middle does for a living, just have a think about in your brain what he does. He's probably not going to be my DJ. He's probably not going to be a photographer. He's likely, you'll say he's an accountant or a banker or something similar. And he's my accountant, that is true. And why is that? Because he looks like an accountant, because he is an accountant, and that's exactly what you see if you walked into his office tomorrow. And that's all the point. The photography is not like there to make you look beautiful or glamorous. It is there to make you look like you do when a customer comes and sits down next to you. So if it's 10 years old with different hair, or you don't look like that at all because you've got a really great filter on it, or you've got bunny ears and a nose, don't use that, please. Just use a photo that shows you being authentically you. So first impressions count. So LinkedIn is going to be probably the thing that most people use, and all you want is a reasonable photo with a banner that says what you do and a tagline that communicates your value. But most people don't do that, and they have things that, with lots of bells and whistles, but they don't actually describe what they do. LinkedIn is very important, and here's a whole bunch of reasons why. Now, it's only social media in China. People get that wrong a lot of the time and say that there's no Western social media. LinkedIn is the only one in China, and it is very popular in India and a lot of other countries as well. So it is a bridge to many other social medias where they don't use Facebook, Instagram, or other things. So, pretty much everybody in business is on it. They've actually just recently dropped their age limit to 13, so more and more school students can go on and set up profiles as well. Interesting stat is that LinkedIn drives more traffic to blogs and websites than Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus combined. Not that Google Plus is really around anymore. Okay, so let's get on to leverage, the last module. And leverage is all about two things. It's connecting to people and it's sharing content. So things like podcasts, that's my podcast there, or blogging, I write blogs on LinkedIn, are vitally important. And I've got this old blog here because, it just shows that when you say something from the heart, say something interesting, it gets more resonance than when you talk about boring stuff. So here's my biggest tip for 2020. The way to cut through on social media is authenticity. Authenticity is the key, particularly right now. Don't sell, attract. The process of getting referrals is to stop being pushy and start being pulling by offering genuine, well thought out value that is authentic and honest to other people. Don't shout at them with a megaphone. Stand next to them and talk to them like a real person. Be somebody who is explaining, this is what I do, this might be helpful for you, rather than thou must do these things. So my learning experience came when I very first started blogging, and I wrote a bunch of blogs about, SEO and websites and those sorts of things, and they went reasonably well. And then I wrote one about why I quit my job to start my own business and put a picture of my kids in there, and it struck a chord with people because it was a combination of heart and head. It wasn't just head. It wasn't a logical blog. It was an emotional blog, but it had some logical content. And when you can bridge that balance nicely, that's when your content will really fly. When people sniff and smell that you're selling to them, they switch off. Tell a story. Tell them about you. Tell them what your habits are and your hobbies and what you believe in. But add some business context to make it useful, and you'll have yourself some great content that will cut through. And the results go for themselves. I've had, millions of referrals, and that's how I run my business, based on people reading my content, remembering it over the years, and then sending referrals my way. But it only happens when you connect to lots of people. So apart from sharing content, you've got to connect to people. And one way to connect is to write a book. Writing a book or writing significant pieces of content isn't for everybody, but if you're going to be an entrepreneur or thought leader, I guarantee you it's a very effective way to communicate your thoughts, because people will sit down and read your book, and if they get to the end, wow, they've just spent 20 hours with you. They've understood your process in intimate detail. They understand who you are as a person, and they feel like they know you, and they're far, far more likely to become a client, become a supporter of you in whatever you're doing, and support you in your entrepreneurial journey or your business life. A blog is the same. It's just a cut down version. So is a podcast. There's lots of different ways to do it. So my last tip is that business is not just business, it's personal. Grab a copy of my book, just Google it, Creating a Powerful Brand. Go to my personal website, my business website, you can find it all there. And I hope this has been useful, and just open your eyes to what personal branding is, because it's not about self-promotion, it's really about helping other people to get where they want to go. And if they think and feel a certain way about you, that is your brand. Your brand isn't your website, it's not your photo, it's not your logo. Those things are important, but at the end of the day, it's all about how others think and feel about us. I hope that's been useful, and I look forward to talking to you in the class another time.